Christiana was never supposed to see him like this. She had been working in the CO estate in Beverly Hills for 11 months. 11 months of early mornings, pressed uniforms, polished floors, and a single unbreakable rule that every member of the household staff understood down to their bones. You do not go near the 3rd floor after 9 at night unless you are summoned. Dangmin CO's private quarters are off limits. Period. Christiana understood the rule. She respected it. She had spent nearly a year in this house moving like a ghost, doing her job with quiet precision, keeping her head down, and giving no one a single reason to notice her. That was the plan. Clean, collect your check, go to sleep, repeat. Simple. But tonight, the schedule had been thrown off. Mrs. Fairbanks, the head of household, had asked Christiana to do a final sweep of the 2nd and 3rd floor hallways because 2 members of the cleaning staff had called in sick. It was late. The rest of the house was dark and silent. Christiana pushed her supply cart along the thick carpet of the 3rd floor corridor, collecting glasses and stacking small plates that had been left outside the study door from an earlier meeting. That is when she heard it. A sound that made her hands stop moving. At first, she was not sure what it was. It was muffled, low, broken. It came through the study door, which was cracked open about 2 inches. Christiana stood very still, her fingers still wrapped around the handle of a crystal glass, and she listened. It was the sound of a man crying. Not the kind of crying you see in movies where a single tear rolls dramatically down someone's cheek. This was the raw, ugly, suffocating kind. The kind where someone is trying to hold it together and failing. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and old and heavy. Christiana knew who was behind that door. Everyone in this house knew. Dangmin CO, 32 years old. Head of the CO Group, one of the most powerful luxury real estate and hospitality empires on the entire East Coast and West Coast combined. The man controlled high-end properties in Beverly Hills, Manhattan, Scottsdale, and Newport Beach. His name carried weight in boardrooms from New York to San Francisco. Business rivals avoided him. Partners respected him. Employees feared him. Nobody had ever seen Dangmin CO cry. Not once, not ever. Christiana should have walked away. Every survival instinct in her body told her to turn around, push her cart back down the hallway, and pretend she never heard a thing. Victor Hale, the head of security, would have told her the same thing. Mrs. Fairbanks would have told her the same thing. Common sense would have told her the same thing. But Christiana did not walk away. She set the glass down on her cart slowly so it would not clink. She stepped toward the door. She pushed it open with her fingertips, gently, just enough to step inside. The study was dim. Only a single desk lamp was on, casting a warm circle of light across scattered papers and an open laptop. But Dangmin was not at the desk. He was on the floor. He was sitting against the wall beside the desk, his long legs stretched out in front of him, his back pressed against the dark wood paneling. His phone was in one hand, the screen still lit with a call that had ended. His other hand was gripping a photograph. Old, creased, worn soft at the edges from years of handling. Christiana could just make out the image. A small Korean woman with silver hair and kind eyes, smiling at the camera like she had a secret she was happy to keep. Dangmin's face was wrecked. His eyes were swollen and red. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscle in his cheek was jumping. His breathing came in sharp, ragged bursts, like he was trying to swallow the air and choke on it at the same time. He heard her footstep. His head snapped up. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that instant, Christiana saw something flash across his face that she recognized immediately. It was not anger, though that was there too. It was shame. The specific, burning shame of being caught in a moment you never wanted anyone to witness. His mouth opened. She could see the words forming. "Get out. Who told you to come in here? Leave now." But before he could speak, Christiana did something that no one in Dangmin CO's life had ever done. She walked over to where he was sitting on the floor. She lowered herself down beside him, her back against the same wall, her knees pulled up slightly, her hands folded in her lap. She did not say, "I am sorry." She did not say, "It will be okay." She did not ask what happened. She did not say a single word. She just sat there. The silence stretched out between them, thick and heavy and full. Dang Min stared at her. She could feel the intensity of it on the side of her face, but she did not turn to meet his gaze. She simply sat. And then, after what felt like a long time, Christiana did one more thing. She reached over and placed her hand gently on top of his, the one that was gripping the photograph. Dang Min did not pull away. His entire body seemed to shudder for a moment, like something cracked inside him that had been holding everything in place. He lowered his head, his shoulders dropped, and he let himself fall apart. They sat like that on the floor of that dark study for a very long time. No words, no explanations, just her hand on his and the sound of a powerful man learning what it felt like to not carry everything alone. The call Dang Min had received that night was from a hospital in Bellevue, Washington. His grandmother, Nana Seo, the woman in the photograph, the woman who had raised him, who had built the foundation of everything the Seo family empire stood on, had been diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. She had weeks, maybe less. And in that moment, none of his wealth, none of his power, none of the properties in Beverly Hills or the towers in Manhattan or the deals in Scottsdale mattered. He was just a grandson who was about to lose the only person who had ever loved him without conditions. And the only person who showed up for him in that moment was the maid who cleaned his hallways. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever seen someone you thought was completely unbreakable fall apart right in front of you? What did you do? Did you stay and sympathize with them, or did you walk away? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to hear from you, and do well to like the video. Now let's continue. The next morning, Dang Min Seo was a different man. Not different in the way Christiana might have hoped, different in the way she feared. She woke up early, pulled on her uniform, tied her hair back, and headed down to the main kitchen for her morning assignment. The house was already moving. Gerald, the cook, was grumbling over a pan of eggs. 2 other staff members were setting up the dining room. Mrs. Fairbanks stood at the kitchen counter with her clipboard, rattling off the day's tasks with the efficiency of an air traffic controller. Christiana took her assignments and got to work. She expected something. She was not sure what exactly. Maybe a look from Dang Min when they crossed paths. Maybe a quiet word. Maybe just an acknowledgement that what had happened last night was real and that it had meant something. She got nothing. At 10:30 that morning, Christiana was polishing the mirror in the east corridor when Dang Min walked past. He was dressed sharply, his posture perfect, his expression sealed shut like a vault door. He walked right by her. His eyes did not flicker in her direction. Not a glance, not a nod, nothing. He moved past her like she was part of the wallpaper. It stung more than she wanted it to. An hour later, Victor Hale found her in the supply room on the 2nd floor. Victor was a tall man in his early 40s with kind eyes that did not quite match the seriousness of his job. He closed the door behind him and spoke to her in a low, respectful voice. "Christiana, I need to talk to you about last night." She felt her stomach tighten. "Whatever you saw," Victor said carefully, "you need to forget. I am not threatening you. That is not what this is. But Dang Min is a very private man. If word got out that he was seen like that, it would create problems. For him and for you." Christiana nodded. "I understand." "Good." Victor paused at the door. He turned back and looked at her for a moment, like he wanted to say something else, something human, but he just nodded and left. Christiana did not talk about that night to anyone. Not Gerald. Not Mrs. Fairbanks. Not the other maids. She folded it up and tucked it into the quiet part of herself where she kept things that mattered too much to share. But something had shifted inside Dang Min, and no amount of cold shoulders could unshift it. He noticed it the next day, and the day after that. He would be walking through the house, and his eyes would find Christiana without him telling them to. He noticed that she arranged the books in his personal library, not by color, the way the previous maid had done, but by author and genre. She had actually read them. He noticed that she left a small glass of water on the windowsill in the sunroom every single afternoon for a stray orange cat that wandered into the garden around 3 o'clock. He noticed that during the staff's lunch break, the other workers gravitated toward her. Gerald sat next to her. The driver, a quiet guy named Marcus, pulled up a chair near her. Even Mrs. Fairbanks, who kept professional distance from everyone, softened slightly when Christiana was in the room. People liked being near her. There was something about her presence that made hard days easier. And then, one evening, Dang Min discovered why. He was in his study, going through contracts for a new property acquisition in Newport Beach. The window cracked open to let in the cool night air. From below, drifting up from the garden courtyard, he heard something that made his pen stop moving. Singing. He stood slowly and walked to the window. Below, in the soft glow of the garden lights, Christiana was hanging freshly washed bed linens on the drying line. Her hands moved rhythmically through the white fabric, pinning and smoothing, and from her mouth came a voice that Dang Min was completely unprepared for. It was not a trained, polished voice. It was not the kind of voice you hear on competition shows where everything is technically perfect. It was raw and full and aching. It was the kind of voice that made you stop what you were doing and hold your breath. It carried emotion like a river carries current. You could feel it in your chest before you even processed the words. Christiana was singing something soulful and slow, and she clearly had no idea anyone was listening. She was just doing what she always did, singing to get through the work, singing to keep herself company in the quiet. Dang Min stood at that window for the entire song. When the last note faded into the night air, he stepped back slowly and sat down at his desk. He stared at the contract in front of him, but the words had turned to shapes. He could not focus. He did not understand what just happened to him, but something in his chest felt different, looser, like a knot that had been tied for years had been pulled slightly free. Meanwhile, something else was happening far from Beverly Hills that would soon threaten everything. In Manhattan, Dang Min's older brother, Tae-sung Seo, had resurfaced. Tae-sung had been disowned by their grandmother 8 years ago after he betrayed the family's trust in a business deal that nearly cost the Seo Group its Manhattan properties. Nana Seo had cut him off completely. No money, no shares, no seat at the table. For 8 years, Tae-sung had been out in the cold. But now, with Nana Seo's health failing, Tae-sung smelled opportunity. He had been quietly meeting with Seo Group board members, planting seeds of doubt about Dang Min's leadership. With the matriarch dying, the empire was vulnerable, and Tae-sung intended to take what he believed was rightfully his. Dang Min did not know the full extent of his brother's moves yet, but he was about to find out. Dang Min flew to Manhattan to handle business that could not wait. He was gone for 5 days. In his absence, the Beverly Hills estate relaxed the way a house does when the person who holds it tight is not home. Conversations were louder. Meals in the staff kitchen lasted longer. Gerald made dessert twice in 1 week, which was unheard of. During this stretch, something important happened. Jonah Whitfield, a tech entrepreneur and music producer from Palo Alto, stopped by the estate to drop off documents for Dang Min. He was early for his scheduled delivery time, so Mrs. Fairbanks asked him to wait in the sitting room while she tracked down the person handling Dang Min's files. Jonah sat on the leather couch, scrolling through his phone, half paying attention to anything. Then he heard it. Coming from the adjacent hallway, someone singing. It was Christiana, polishing the mahogany banister, completely absorbed in a song that poured out of her the way sunlight pours through a window. Effortless, warm, undeniable. Jonah put his phone down. He stood up from the couch. He walked to the doorway of the sitting room and stood there, listening, his mouth slightly open. Jonah was not a casual music fan. He had produced indie albums, helped launch 2 artists who now had millions of streams on major platforms, and spent most of his free time hunting for the voice that would stop him in his tracks. He had been searching for years. He had just found it in a hallway that smelled like lemon polish. When Christiana finished the section of banister she was working on, she looked up and saw a man standing in the doorway, staring at her. She froze, embarrassed. "I am sorry," Jonah said quickly. "I did not mean to startle you. I could not walk away from that. Your voice is extraordinary." Christiana blinked. "Thank you. I sing while I work. It is not anything." "It is very much something." Jonah reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. "My name is Jonah Whitfield. I produce music. I have a studio in Palo Alto. I would love to record a demo with you. No cost, no strings, just a session to capture what you do." Christiana took the card, looked at it, and put it in her apron pocket with a polite but uncertain smile. She thanked him and went back to her work. She had been told her whole life she had a gift, but she had never pursued it. Singing was how she survived her days, not a career path. Meanwhile, in Manhattan, Dang-min was sitting across from his brother in the CO Group's Midtown office, and the air between them could have cracked glass. Taesung Seo was 35. 3 years older than Dang-min. Where Dang-min was sharp and intense, Taesung was smooth and easy. He had the kind of smile that made you feel comfortable right up until the moment you realized you should not have been. "You look tired, little brother," Taesung said, leaning back in his chair. "What are you doing here, Taesung?" "I am here because our grandmother is dying, and this company needs leadership that is not emotionally compromised." Dang-min's jaw tightened. "Grandmother removed you from this company for a reason." "Grandmother is sentimental. She always was, but the board is not. And the board is starting to wonder whether the man sitting in the big chair has what it takes to keep the CO Group on top." Taesung leaned forward. "I have already spoken with 2 of the 5 board members. They have concerns about your focus, about your priorities, about whether your heart is in this." Dang-min stared at his brother for a long moment. "Stay away from the family, Taesung." Taesung smiled. "Family is exactly what this is about, little brother." Dang-min returned to Beverly Hills 3 days later, wound tight as a coiled spring. The weight pressing down on him was enormous. His grandmother's illness, his brother's betrayal, the empire he was trying to hold together with both hands while the ground shifted beneath him. That evening, Christiana brought his tea to the study. Mrs. Fairbanks had assigned her this task weeks ago because Christiana was the only staff member Dang-min had not snapped at in recent memory. She set the tray down on the corner of his desk and turned to leave. "You sing." His voice stopped her at the door. It was not a question. "I have heard you," he said, still looking at his papers. "In the courtyard, in the hallway." Christiana stood very still. "You are good," he said. "Thank you, sir." A long silence filled the room. Dang-min set his pen down. "My grandmother used to sing old Korean folk songs. She had a terrible voice." The ghost of something almost like a smile crossed his face, but it did not matter. He looked up then. His eyes met hers. Something passed between them in that moment, quiet and unnamed. Not romance, not yet, but recognition. 2 people seeing each other clearly for the first time. "That will be all," he said softly. Christiana left the study, but neither of them would forget the way that room felt. Over the next few weeks, the dynamic between Dang-min and Christiana changed in ways so subtle that only the most observant members of the household noticed. He started requesting her specifically, not dramatically, not obviously, just small adjustments. Christiana would deliver his meals to the study. Christiana would organize his personal library. Christiana would prepare the sunroom where he took his morning calls. Each interaction was brief, professional, and charged with something that neither of them acknowledged out loud. A look held half a second too long, a question about the book she was shelving, a comment about the weather that was really not about the weather at all. Gerald noticed first because Gerald noticed everything that happened in that house. He raised an eyebrow at Christiana one morning over the kitchen counter and said, "Girl, he asked for you to bring his breakfast again. That man has never cared who brings his breakfast." Christiana shrugged and changed the subject. Mrs. Fairbanks noticed second. She did not say anything, but she started watching the 2 of them with the careful attention of someone who had worked in wealthy households long enough to know exactly what a look like that meant. Victor Hale noticed third. He also said nothing, but his silence was heavier than everyone else's words. Then came the evening that changed everything in a way that could not be ignored. Dang-min was hosting a formal business dinner at the estate. 3 investors from Scottsdale were considering backing a massive new luxury development project, and the dinner was designed to seal the deal. The dining room was immaculate. The food was exceptional. The wine was expensive, but the conversation was flat. The investors were stiff, cautious men who spoke in numbers and percentages and risk assessments. Dang Min was sharp and prepared, but even he could feel the energy draining from the room. The deal was slipping, and he knew it. During a pause between the main course and dessert, one of the investors, a silver-haired man named Richard, leaned back in his chair and said casually, "I heard from Jonah Whitfield at a networking event in Palo Alto that you have someone on your staff with quite a remarkable voice. Any truth to that?" The table went quiet. Dang Min looked at Richard for a moment, then glanced toward the kitchen, where Christiana was helping Gerald plate the dessert. Under normal circumstances, he would have dismissed the comment and redirected the conversation to projected returns. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the way the evening was going. Maybe it was the memory of her voice drifting up from the courtyard. Maybe it was something he was not ready to name. He turned to Mrs. Fairbanks, who was standing near the doorway. "Would you ask Christiana if she would be willing to sing something for our guests? It is a request, not an order." Mrs. Fairbanks hesitated for just a fraction of a second, then nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. 2 minutes later, Christiana appeared in the dining room doorway. She was still in her maid's uniform. There was a dusting of powdered sugar on her sleeve from the dessert plating. She looked terrified. 4 wealthy men in tailored suits sat at a table full of crystal and silver, staring at her. The room was enormous. She had no microphone, no backing track, no preparation. Dang Min caught her eye from the head of the table. He gave her the smallest nod, almost imperceptible, but she saw it. Christiana walked to the far end of the room, near the grand piano that had not been played in years. She stood beside it. She closed her eyes. And then she sang. The room collapsed into silence. It was a soulful, stripped-down song, something about holding on when everything around you is letting go. Her voice started soft and intimate, like she was singing to one person, and then it opened up, expanding to fill every corner of that enormous dining room. The crystal glasses on the table seemed to vibrate. The candle flames held still. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Christiana's voice was not just beautiful. It was honest. It carried a weight and warmth that bypassed your brain entirely and went straight to the center of your chest. Every note felt like a truth she was telling for the first time. When the last note faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then Richard from Scottsdale started clapping. Then the man next to him. Then the whole table. The third investor, a younger man in wire-rimmed glasses, had tears running down his face and did not seem to care who saw them. Richard turned to Dang Min and said, his voice slightly rough, "That is the most extraordinary thing I have heard in 20 years." The deal closed that night, handshakes and signatures and promises of wire transfers, but Dang Min barely registered any of it. His mind was locked on one image. Christiana opening her eyes after the last note, the look on her face, brave and terrified and luminous all at once. After the guests left and the dining room was cleared, Dang Min walked to the kitchen. Christiana was at the sink, back in work mode, washing dishes. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her hands were submerged in soapy water. She did not hear him come in. "You did not have to do that," he said from the doorway. She turned. Water dripped from her fingers onto the tile floor. "I know," she said. They looked at each other across the kitchen. The fluorescent light hummed above them. The clock on the wall ticked. "Thank you, Christiana," Dang Min said. It was the first time he had ever used her first name. And the way he said it, careful and deliberate, like each syllable mattered, made something shift inside both of them that could not be shifted back. The next few weeks hit Dang Min from every direction at once. Taesung made his next move. He leaked information to a prominent New York business journal, a carefully constructed story suggesting that the Seo Group was financially unstable and that leadership was fractured from within. The article was full of unnamed sources and strategic half-truths designed to do maximum damage with minimum fingerprints. It worked. The story sent shockwaves through the company. Stock in CO group-affiliated ventures dropped. Partners in Newport Beach and Manhattan started calling with nervous questions. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. At the same time, Dangmin was flying to Bellevue every weekend to sit with Nana CO in her private care facility. Each visit, his grandmother was smaller. Her voice was softer. Her hands, which had once gripped his with the strength of a woman who had built an empire from nothing, now felt like paper. And then, into the middle of this chaos, walked Priscilla Monroe. Dangmin's ex-fiancé showed up at the Beverly Hills estate on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, in a white dress and designer sunglasses, looking like she had just stepped off a magazine cover. She had left Dangmin 2 years ago, right in the middle of his first major corporate battle, with a note that said she needed someone who could give her the life she deserved. She had moved to Aspen. She had not looked back. Until now. Priscilla sat in Dangmin's living room, crossed her legs, and delivered a performance that would have earned her an award. She told him she had made a terrible mistake leaving. She told him she had grown. She told him she wanted to be by his side through this difficult time. What Priscilla did not tell Dangmin was that she had been in contact with Taesung for 3 months. Their arrangement was simple. Priscilla would get close to Dangmin again, feed information about his strategies and vulnerabilities to Taesung, and in return, Taesung would guarantee her a very comfortable position in the New Order once he seized control of the CO empire. Dangmin was not naive, but he was exhausted. Bone-deep, soul-deep exhausted. And Priscilla knew exactly which version of herself to present to a man who was running on empty. Her arrival changed the household dynamic instantly. Priscilla treated the staff like they were beneath her notice. She snapped at Gerald over breakfast preparation. She ignored Mrs. Fairbanks entirely. She spoke to the cleaning staff without making eye contact. And she was particularly cold toward Christiana. It took Priscilla exactly 48 hours to notice the way Dangmin's eyes tracked Christiana whenever she moved through a room, the way his voice changed slightly when he spoke to her, the way the entire kitchen fell quiet and warm when Christiana walked in, and how Dangmin had once paused in the doorway to listen before moving on. Priscilla noticed all of it, and she did not like any of it. She found Christiana in the laundry room on a Thursday afternoon. Christiana was folding white sheets, her movements precise and rhythmic. Priscilla leaned against the doorframe and studied her with the cold calculation of a woman who had spent her entire life measuring threats. "You are Christiana, right?" Priscilla said. "The one who sings." Christiana looked up. "Yes, ma'am." Priscilla smiled. It was the kind of smile that did not reach her eyes. "That is sweet, really, but let me give you some advice, sweetheart. Woman to woman." She took a step closer. "You are the help, know your lane. Whatever you think is happening here is not happening. Men like Dangmin do not end up with women like you. That is not how the world works." Christiana said nothing. She held Priscilla's gaze for a long moment, then looked back down at the sheets and continued folding. Her hands were steady, but underneath the fabric, her fingers were shaking. That night, alone in her small room on the staff floor, Christiana could not sleep. She lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, replaying Priscilla's words. She was not angry. She was something worse. She was starting to believe them. She turned over and opened her nightstand drawer. Jonah Whitfield's business card was still there, slightly bent at one corner. She had looked at it a dozen times over the past few weeks, but had never dialed the number. Tonight she picked up her phone and called. Jonah answered on the 3rd ring. "I am ready," Christiana said. "I want to make that demo." 2 worlds that had been orbiting each other were about to crash together. On her next day off, Christiana took a flight to Palo Alto. Jonah had set up a session at a small, warm-sounding studio tucked behind a coffee shop on a tree-lined street. It was the opposite of everything in the CO estate. It was cozy, personal, and smelled like cedar wood and old vinyl. Christiana was nervous. She showed up in jeans and a simple top, looking nothing like the maid in the pressed uniform. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt like herself. Jonah kept it simple. He gave her a soft, minimal track and told her to close her eyes and just do what she always did. "Pretend you are hanging laundry in the garden," he said with a grin. "Pretend nobody is here." Christiana closed her eyes. She took a breath, and she sang. The sound engineer behind the glass slowly took off his headphones and stared through the window at her. Jonah leaned back in his chair and pressed his hand over his mouth, shaking his head. They recorded 3 songs that afternoon. Each one landed differently, but all 3 carried the same gut-level honesty that made Christiana's voice impossible to ignore. When the session ended, Jonah walked her out to the parking lot and said, with complete sincerity, "You have one of the most compelling voices I have heard in 10 years of doing this. I want to send this demo to some people. Can I?" Christiana agreed but asked him to keep her name private, just for now. She was not ready. Jonah honored the request. He uploaded the strongest track to a private distribution channel credited only to the letter C, and sent it to a handful of trusted industry contacts, including a music supervisor at a major streaming platform. Within 48 hours, the song appeared on a curated playlist for emerging artists. Within a week, it had crossed 200,000 streams. Within 2 weeks, it was at 5 million. Comments poured in from everywhere. "Who is this? This voice made me cry on the train. I have played this 47 times and it hits harder every time. Who is C?" Music blogs picked it up. Social media accounts dedicated to new music discovery shared it. The mystery of the anonymous singer became a thing. Christiana, back in Beverly Hills, scrubbing bathroom tiles and vacuuming hallways, had no idea. While her voice was quietly taking over the internet, Dang Min was in Manhattan fighting for his empire. The board meeting was brutal. Tae-sung showed up in a tailored suit with a slick presentation and a formal proposal to restructure leadership of the CO group, positioning himself as co-CEO alongside Dang Min. He had 2 board members firmly in his corner and was working on a third. His argument was pointed. Dang Min was distracted. Dang Min was emotionally compromised by their grandmother's illness. Dang Min was not the leader the company needed for its next chapter. Dang Min pushed back hard. His numbers were strong. His vision was clear. His track record spoke for itself, but the board was rattled by the negative press, and Tae-sung had planted just enough doubt to make them hesitate. The vote was split. The board gave both brothers 60 days to present competing visions for the company's future. Whoever the board backed at the end of that period would take full control. The clock started ticking. Victor Hale, doing what Victor Hale always did, ran background checks and communication audits on everyone in Dang Min's inner circle. What he found made him sit down heavily in his office chair. Phone records showed that Priscilla Monroe had been in regular contact with Tae-sung Seo. Calls, texts, for months. The timeline aligned perfectly with her sudden reappearance in Dang Min's life. Victor brought the evidence to Dang Min the same night he returned from Manhattan. Dang Min read through the records slowly. His face did not change. His voice did not rise. He went very, very still, and then he stood up from his desk. He found Priscilla in the sitting room, scrolling through her phone with a glass of wine on the table beside her. He closed the door behind him. "How long?" he asked. Priscilla looked up, confused. "How long what?" Dang Min placed the phone records on the table in front of her. Priscilla's face went through several stages in rapid succession. Confusion, recognition, panic, calculation. She tried to deny it first. Then she tried to explain it. Then she tried to move close to him, her hand reaching for his arm, her voice dropping into the soft register she used when she wanted something. Dang Min stepped back from her touch. "Get your things and leave my house." Priscilla's mask crumbled. The softness vanished. The beauty stayed, but it turned sharp and ugly. "You are pathetic," she said. "You know that? Your grandmother is dying, your brother is about to take everything, and you are sitting here pinning after the help. The maid, Dang Min, you are going to lose your empire over a woman who folds your sheets." She said it loud enough that 2 staff members in the hallway heard every word. Gerald told Christiana about it before the end of the day. He was not trying to gossip. He was trying to protect her. But Christiana felt the words land like a punch to the stomach, not because of the insult, because of the implication that other people could see what she had been desperately trying to hide from herself. She cared about Dang Min not as an employer, not as a duty. She cared about him in the way that terrified her because Priscilla's words were still echoing in her head. You are the help. Know your lane. Men like him do not end up with women like you. Dang Min received a call from Bellevue at 6 in the morning on a Thursday. His grandmother had taken a severe turn. He was on a private jet within the hour. When he arrived at the care facility, Nana Seo was propped up in her bed, smaller than the last time he had seen her, but her eyes were still sharp. Still the eyes of a woman who had crossed oceans, built empires, and raised a family with an iron will and a tender heart. She held his hand. Her grip was weak but deliberate. Sit, she said. Stop hovering like a worried bird. You look like your grandfather when he was anxious. Dang Min sat. He held her hand in both of his. They talked for a long time. About the company, about T-Sung, about the properties in Manhattan and the new developments in Scottsdale. But eventually, the way she always did, Nana Seo cut through all the business talk and got to the thing that actually mattered. Your grandfather built everything we have, she said. But he was ruthless in the boardroom and gentle in love. That is what made him great. Not the money, not the buildings, the balance. He knew when to be steel and when to be soft. She paused, studying her grandson's face. You have become all steel, Dang Min. You are a fortress with no door. It frightens me. I am fine, grandmother. You are not fine. You are surviving. That is not the same thing. She squeezed his hand. Let someone in, not for the empire, for your heart. Then she asked a question that Dang Min was not prepared for. Is there someone? He did not answer, but his grandmother had known him since the day he was born. She read his face the way other people read books. There is, she said softly. A smile broke across her face, fragile and beautiful. Bring her to me before I go. I want to meet the one who makes my grandson's eyes look like that. Dang Min flew back to Beverly Hills that evening. He was in turmoil. His grandmother's words had opened something in him that he had spent years welding shut, and now he could not close it again. Meanwhile, the world was looking for Christiana. The anonymous demo had exploded. 5 million streams became 10 million. The song was on radio stations. Music blogs were writing long features about the mystery singer known only as C. Jonah Whitfield's phone was ringing nonstop with calls from managers, labels, and booking agents. He called Christiana and told her, his voice shaking with excitement, that the entire music industry was trying to find her. Christiana sat on the edge of her small bed in the staff quarters of a Beverly Hills mansion, in her maid's uniform, and stared at her phone. She had gone from complete anonymity to viral sensation without even knowing it was happening. She had told only one person in the house, Gerald, who she swore to absolute secrecy. Gerald, who was possibly the worst secret keeper in the state of California, was trying his hardest. He had only told 2 people, which, for Gerald, showed remarkable restraint. Late that night, Dang Min was sitting alone in the sunroom. The lights were off. The house was quiet. He was staring at nothing in particular, the weight of everything pressing down on him like a physical force. Christiana came in to close the windows for the night. She saw him sitting in the dark and started to back out of the room. Stay. One word, barely above a whisper. Christiana hesitated. Then she stepped inside and sat down in the chair across from him. And for the first time since she had started working in this house, Dang Min talked to her. Really talked. Not as an employer to staff. Not as a powerful man to someone beneath him. He talked to her like a human being speaking to the only other human being in the world who might understand. He told her about his grandmother, the diagnosis, the way she was getting smaller every time he visited. He told her about T-Sung and the 60-day clock and the board members who were circling like sharks. He told her about Priscilla and the betrayal and the way it had confirmed something he had always feared, that the people closest to him would always want the name and never the man. He told her that the night she sat with him on the floor of his study was the first time in years he had felt like a person instead of a machine. Christiana listened to every word. She did not interrupt. She did not rush to give advice or offer empty comfort. She let him empty himself out, and when he was done, when the silence had settled between them like a blanket, she said one thing. "You are not a machine. Dangmin, you never were." It was the first time she had used his name, and the sound of it in her voice, gentle and certain, undid something in him that he did not know how to rebuild. He reached across the space between them, his hand extended toward hers in the dark. She looked at it for a moment, then she took it. They sat like that for a long time, just two people holding hands in a dark room while the world outside waited to tear them both apart. Neither of them noticed the flash. A photographer with a long-range lens, positioned outside the estate gates, captured the moment through the sunroom window. The next morning, the photo was posted on a tabloid blog with a headline that would set fire to everything. SEO Group Heir and his household maid, a secret romance. Taesung's CEO saw the article at 7 in the morning. He smiled the way a man smiles when the last piece of a puzzle clicks into place. The article detonated like a bomb. By noon, it had been picked up by every gossip outlet and business blog that covered the ultra-wealthy. By evening, it was trending. The comments section was a war zone. Some people mocked Dangmin. Some people mocked Christiana. Some people wrote paragraphs defending them both. The internet turned their private moment into public property. Taesung moved fast. He presented the tabloid coverage to the CEO Group board as evidence of Dangmin's poor judgment and lack of professional focus. His argument was surgical. A man who is romantically involved with his domestic staff cannot be trusted to lead a multi-billion-dollar empire. It is a liability. It is a distraction. It is proof that Dangmin has lost his way. Two more board members shifted their support. The 60-day window collapsed. An emergency vote was scheduled for 1 week from the announcement. At the same time, an entertainment journalist connected two dots that had been floating in the public space. The viral mystery singer, C, and a woman named Christiana who worked as a maid at the CEO estate in Beverly Hills. The journalist published the story with photos, streaming data, and quotes from music industry insiders praising the unknown voice. Within hours, Christiana's real identity was everywhere. Her face, her name, her job, her voice, all of it laid bare for the world to examine and judge. The internet split in two. The cruel side was predictable. She is just a maid trying to sleep her way up. Gold digger with a good voice. This is embarrassing. But the other side was louder, much louder. Millions of people who had fallen in love with the voice of C now had a face and a story, and they rallied around her like an army. Her voice healed something in me, and you are not going to ruin this. This woman was cleaning bathrooms with a gift like that. Protect Christiana at all costs. She sang her way out of invisibility, and some of you are mad about it. Check yourselves. The support was overwhelming, passionate, and fierce. Christiana, sitting in her small room with her phone buzzing nonstop, was in shock. Her world had been ripped open overnight, and she did not know how to hold the pieces. Dangmin found out about Taesung's board play and the identity exposure within the same hour. He stood in his study, reading through the coverage on his laptop, and something shifted inside him. Not the panicked, reactive shift of a man under attack. Something deeper, calmer, more resolved. The conversations with his grandmother, the nights with Christiana, the slow, painful process of becoming human again after years of living as a machine. It had all been building toward this. He was done playing defense. He called Victor into the study and closed the door. I need everything you have on Taesung, every communication, every meeting, every deal he has been making behind my back. I want it documented, organized, and bulletproof. We have 1 week. Victor nodded. I have most of it already. I have been building the file for a month. Good, then let us finish it. Dangmin went to find Christiana. She was in her room, sitting on the edge of her bed, staring at the screen of her phone, which was scrolling with thousands of notifications. Her eyes were wide. Her hands were trembling slightly. She looked up when he appeared in the doorway, and the expression on her face was equal parts terrified and hopeful. Dang Min walked in and knelt in front of her. He took both of her hands in his. "I need you to hear me," he said. His voice was steady and certain. "You are not a scandal. You are not a headline. You are not a story for people to argue about in comment sections. You are the most real thing in my life. And I am not going to let anyone, not my brother, not a board of directors, not the entire internet, make you feel small." Christiana's eyes filled. "They are going to take everything from you because of me." Dang Min shook his head slowly. "They are going to try." He asked her to come to Bellevue with him. He wanted her to meet his grandmother. The request hung in the air between them, heavy with everything it implied. This was not an employer asking a favor. This was a man asking the woman he loved to step into the most sacred part of his life. Christiana said yes. The flight to Bellevue was quiet. They sat next to each other but did not speak much. Some moments are too big for words. At the care facility, Nana Seo was in her bed near the window. The afternoon light made her silver hair glow. She was frail, but when the door opened and she saw Dang Min walk in with a tall, fair-skinned black woman beside him, her entire face changed. Her eyes lit up with a warmth that filled the room like sunlight. "Come here," she said to Christiana, extending a thin hand. Christiana walked to the bedside and took the old woman's hand. Nana Seo studied her face for a long moment. Her eyes moved slowly over Christiana's features, reading her the way she had read people her entire life. Not judging, understanding. "So you are the one," Nana Seo said softly. Christiana did not know what to say. She smiled. "I hear you can sing," Nana Seo said. "My grandson has never told me this directly, but I am his grandmother. I know things." She looked at Dang Min, who stood near the door with his hands in his pockets, trying very hard to look casual and failing completely. Nana Seo smiled at him, then turned back to Christiana. "Will you sing for me? Something gentle?" Christiana glanced at Dang Min. He nodded. She turned back to Nana Seo, still holding her hand, and began to sing. It was soft. It was tender. It was the kind of song you sing to someone you love when you know the time is short. Christiana's voice, stripped of all production and amplification, filled that small hospital room with something that felt like grace. Nana Seo closed her eyes and listened. A tear slipped down her weathered cheek, then another. She did not wipe them away. She let them come. When the song ended, the room was very still. Nana Seo opened her eyes and looked at her grandson. "This one," she said, first in Korean, then in English. "Keep this one." The CO Group board meeting took place at the company headquarters in Midtown Manhattan on a cold, clear Tuesday morning. The conference room was on the 42nd floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. Every seat at the long mahogany table was filled. Board members, legal counsel, executive staff. Tae-sung arrived first, as he always did when he wanted to set the stage. He was impeccably dressed, perfectly calm, and radiating the quiet confidence of a man who believed he had already won. He had his presentation loaded. He had his allies positioned. He had his victory speech rehearsed. Dang Min arrived second, with Victor Hale one step behind him. The meeting began with Tae-sung's presentation. He was smooth. He was compelling. He laid out his vision for the CO Group's future with the skill of a man who had spent months preparing for this exact moment. He referenced the tabloid coverage of Dang Min. He referenced the negative press. He questioned Dang Min's focus, his priorities, his fitness to lead. When he finished, the room was quiet. 2 board members nodded. A third glanced at Dang Min with something like pity. Then Dang Min stood. He did not raise his voice. He did not rush. He spoke with the measured control of a man who had spent a lifetime learning how to command a room. But he was not playing Tae-sung's game. He was ending it. "Before I present my vision for this company," Dang Min said, "I want to address the foundation my brother has built his case on." He nodded at Victor, who distributed a bound document to every person at the table. 38 pages. Time-stamped communications between T-Sung and Priscilla Monroe, showing that T-Sung had deliberately planted his ex-fiancée in Dang-min's home to extract information. Documented evidence that T-Sung had orchestrated the leak to the business journal, specifically timing it to destabilize the company's stock price during a critical acquisition window. And the final blow, evidence that T-Sung had been secretly negotiating with a competing real estate conglomerate to sell off 3 of the CO Group's most valuable properties the moment he took control. The sell-off would have gutted the empire their grandmother built. It would have turned the CO Group from a family legacy into a hollowed-out shell, and T-Sung would have walked away with the profit. The room went dead silent. Board members flipped through the documents. Faces changed. The 2 who had been allied with T-Sung read the pages with expressions that shifted from confusion to anger to disgust. T-Sung tried to recover. He stood. He smiled. He called the evidence fabricated and desperate. He tried to redirect. But Victor Hale had not built a career on sloppy work. Every document was verified. Every communication was authenticated. Every timestamp was airtight. The board chairwoman, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Park, looked at T-Sung over the top of her reading glasses. "Mr. CEO," she said, "I would advise you to stop talking." The vote was unanimous. T-Sung was removed from any involvement with the CO Group, permanently. His shares were frozen pending a full legal review. His access to company systems was revoked before he left the building. His name was struck from the company records. T-Sung stood at the door of the conference room and looked at his younger brother. His jaw was tight. His eyes were hard. "Grandmother always chose you," he said. Dang-min looked at him. No, she chose the one who would not destroy what she built. T-Sung left the building. He did not look back. The weeks that followed reshaped everything. Dang-min stabilized the CO Group. The stock recovered. The Scottsdale Development Project moved forward. The board, embarrassed by how close they had come to handing the company to a man who would have sold it for parts, gave Dang-min their full and unconditional support. Christiana's music career exploded. Jonah Whitfield officially became her manager. She signed with a label that respected her artistry and her voice, a deal that Jonah negotiated fiercely because he believed in what she had. She recorded her first full project over 6 weeks in studios in Palo Alto and Manhattan. The internet, which had already fallen in love with the mystery voice of C, now had the full story. A maid who sang while she cleaned, discovered by accident, revealed by circumstance, and extraordinary beyond anyone's expectations. Her debut release went live on a Friday morning. By Friday evening, it was the #1 trending album on every major platform. Music critics wrote reviews that used words like transcendent and achingly real. Comment sections overflowed. "Christiana made me believe in music again. I played this album 7 times in one day and cried each time." She went from folding sheets to folding the entire music industry in half. Queen. She moved out of the staff quarters at the Beverly Hills estate, but she did not move far. Dang-min and Christiana's relationship grew openly. It was not a fairy tale. He was still intense, still driven, still a man who had spent most of his life building walls. But the door his grandmother had begged him to create, he built it, and Christiana walked through it every single day. There was an evening, about 2 months after everything settled, when Christiana performed at a small, intimate venue in Manhattan. No big production, just her voice and a piano. The room held maybe 200 people. Dang-min sat in the back row. Victor was beside him, but Dang-min barely noticed. His eyes were locked on the stage. When Christiana began to sing, the room vanished. He was back in the garden courtyard, watching her hang linens in the half-light. He was back in the study, her hand on his, the first time anyone had ever stayed without being asked to. He was back in every moment that had led to this one. Halfway through the song, Christiana looked out into the audience. Her eyes found him in the back row. She smiled. Not a performative smile, not a stage smile, a real one. The kind that says, I see you and I know you and I am glad you are here. Dang Min smiled back. And Victor Hale, who had worked for this man for almost a decade and had never seen that expression on his face, looked away to give them the moment. Nana Seo passed away peacefully in Bellevue on a Sunday morning in early spring. She was surrounded by family. Her room was filled with flowers, and on the small table beside her bed sat a speaker that the nurses had set up at her request. It played Christiana's recordings on a gentle loop. The nurses said she smiled every time the music played, even at the end. At the funeral held at a private garden ceremony in Bellevue, Dang Min delivered a eulogy. It was short. It was controlled. He spoke about his grandmother's strength, her vision, her refusal to accept anything less than the best from the people she loved. He kept his voice steady throughout. He did not cry. But when he returned to his seat, Christiana took his hand. And this time, in front of the board members, the business partners, the family, the staff, everyone, Dang Min held on. He did not let go. He did not care who saw. Months later, the Beverly Hills estate. The sunroom filled with morning light. The grand piano that had sat unused for years was now slightly out of tune because someone had been playing it. Badly. Christiana sat at the piano bench, picking out notes with more enthusiasm than skill, her brow furrowed in concentration. Dang Min walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one on top of the piano and leaned against the side, watching her. You are terrible at piano, he said. I know, she said, grinning without looking up. I mean genuinely, impressively bad. I know. She hit a wrong note that made both of them wince. She laughed. Dang Min sat down beside her on the bench. She rested her head on his shoulder. Through the window, the orange stray cat was perched on the sunroom windowsill, drinking from the small glass of water that Christiana still set out every single day, the same way she had done from the very beginning. Outside, the world was loud and messy and full of people with opinions. Tabloids still wrote about them. The internet still talked. Business rivals still circled. Life was still complicated and heavy and real. But inside this room, in this light, there was just a man who had learned that breaking was not the end. And a woman who had taught him that by doing the simplest, bravest thing anyone had ever done for him. She stayed, without saying a word. And that had made all the difference.